What is up? Can you see me? There I am. What's happening, everybody? This is Josh Howell with the Nerf Herders Assemble podcast. This won't be a full podcast episode today. This is actually part of the segment my friend showed me. And if you haven't seen the previous segments, I'll give you a brief recap. Basically, I'm a crazy movie buff. And while many of my friends are also crazy movie buffs, a lot of them aren't or just not to the same level. And so, always just growing up, I've always been kind of the person to bring new films or tell people about films that are coming out or something like that, or the first one to see it in theaters, and then kind of drag my friends along for the second viewing. And sometimes they've really appreciated that. Sometimes they've really not appreciated that. Um, but yeah, so that's normally been the case. However, every once in a while, one of my friends introduces me to something. And it could be something I've never heard of before, or it could just be something that I've heard of it, but I never got the chance to see it. And those are rare cases, but most of the time, they were fantastic cases. So in the past, I've talked with Billy Peck about The Greasy Strangler. I talked with Doug Holmes about Flash Gordon. And so now, today, we're going to talk about The Matrix. And I've got my best friend in the world, Ali Gambino, to join me. So what's up, Ali? How you doing?
I'm good. Last name's Roby now, though. Remember, I'm
Oh
married.
my gosh. Okay, so Ali got married not a short time ago, but a long time ago. But I've known her. I've known her by that. I'm sorry. It's live, so it's Ali Roby. But see, I didn't even put last names on here, so it doesn't. It
It's all
doesn't. Right. It's not written. The mistake is not written down. But anyway,
good.
this is Ali. I've known her since eighth grade. So
20
yeah,
years.
a while. Yeah. And growing up, we watched a lot of stuff together, especially with like band parties or hanging out in Allie's basement watching movies like Stir of Echoes with Kevin Bacon and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Uh, but and I can't remember if this was for my birthday or for Christmas, but you gave me the VHS of the first R-rated movie I'd ever owned, and that was The Matrix.
Yes. I think it was for your birthday, maybe.
Well, the VHS dropped on December 7th, 1999. So if you gave it to me the next year, that would have been for my 14th birthday, I believe. So it's possible.
Possible. We
Hmm.
met in 2000, so uh,
Did we? We met in 2000? That's not right. Are you
yeah,
serious?
yeah, because I moved to Nebraska in 2000. So
Oh, okay. All right. Oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. Okay, so that would have been the next year. So it would have probably been for my 14th birthday.
hmm.
So or no, that would have been my 13th birthday. Yeah. That makes sense.
No, probably
So
your 14th birthday. Math is hard today.
I know it's so hard. It's
'Cause
so hard. It's a
you're
Sunday.
older than me, and I was 13 when we moved here. So
Oh gosh. All right. Well, I'm tired. I've been camping all weekend and I'm just yeah, not doing math very well.
that's all right.
Either way, I had known about the Matrix, but my parents were very strict back then, and they wouldn't let me go to some PG-13 movies in the theaters, let alone an R-rated movie. So you to have bought this movie for me, you clearly saw it before me, right?
I had seen it before you. My dad and
Mm-hmm.
sister were really into it when it came out, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty sure we had watched it. You and I had watched it in my basement before I got it for you, and you loved it so much that I got it for you, not realizing that your parents would have been super pissed.
Oh,
But
they were livid, and we did watch it in your basement first because I remember rocking out to the Rage Against the Machine in credits, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. But yes, that is when we saw it first, and I was gonna hide the VHS from my parents for a while. I don't remember how they found out, but I remember we watched it, and they were just like, "You are not allowed to own an R-rated movie." But this was in 2000. This was a movie that came out in 1999. R-rated back then. Even for its time, this is a very like tame R-rated movie. There was hardly any language in it. The violence was not gory violence. It was just a hardcore sci-fi movie, and I loved it so much, and I was so happy to get that from you. So I thought we would chat a little bit about it. And I thought we'd start by watching the trailer for it, the original theatrical trailer. So let me pull that up. Matrix original theatrical trailer. And sometimes the trailer for a movie might not have the final sound, or the final soundtrack, or the trailer doesn't really give like the real feel for the movie.
Right.
So I haven't seen this. I just pulled it up. I haven't seen it, since 1999. So I'm really curious to see how this will fare with my memories of the film. So yeah, let's give this a listen here, or a watch and listen. Trinity.
Little Bill and Ted going on there.
Yep.
What if you were unable to wake from that dream? How would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world? What is happening to me?
The answer is out there, Neo. It's the question that drives us.
What is the Matrix? The Matrix is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth?
They're watching you, Neo.
Oh, that was epic.
Beings are a disease. You are a cancer of this planet. You are the cure. Get me the hell out of here! Welcome to the real world.
It's a long trailer.
This one.
So you're here to save the world. So what do you need?
Guns. Lots of guns.
I always thought that was so cool.
That's why it's going to work.
Buckle your seatbelt, Dorothy. Because Kansas is going bye-bye.
Favorite scene in the whole movie?
This is interesting music.
Definitely not from the movie, from my recollection. Right?
No, I mean, I don't remember it.
There's a lot in this trailer.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
What is the Matrix.com?
Oh, so good.
Yeah, that was pretty good. I'm gonna switch to the PowerPoint here. Bam. So yeah, so that was the trailer. Yeah, it showed a lot. It showed a lot for a first trailer, for the theatrical trailer. But I mean, that was the question. That was the selling point. Was what is the Matrix? And I liked how they at least didn't tell you that. They just showed a lot of action. But yeah, I loved how the first thing you see with Keanu Reeves is the whoa. Like, I mean, up until that point, he'd kind of been, this is a big movie for him. He'd been in a lot of like comedies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But this was, this wasn't like a comedy movie, and this was like one of his serious action roles. But I think maybe they were afraid like laying that on too thick, so they introduced him in the trailer with whoa, like it's still the Keanu, just in a different setting.
Yeah, I think this probably launched his his action career in film, for sure.
For sure. Yeah. And this was written and directed by the Wachowskis. Came out in 1999. And it is definitely been an inspiration for a lot of sci-fi films
Yeah.
over the years. It was monumental in its storytelling, in its concepts, like like that loading dock. When they got all their weapons before going into the Matrix. In the it's all an illusion type conspiracies. And then in its special effects, and it was a part of the Matrix trilogy. There's a we'll get into it. Let's just kind of go into the general plot of the film first. But this is that. Oh no, where's it at? There you go. This is the awesome VHS that you gave me, which I was so excited to have. Very very thankful for that.
So rebellious.
But yeah, so this was the main crew here. You had Morpheus, you had Neo, you had Trinity, and then you had the traitor dude, played by what's his face? What's
I cannot think of his name.
Joe Pantoliano. He was in he's in like the Bad Boys movies and everything. He's great in this film. I've always loved this graphic. This is a cool graphic. But I was always glad of all the other team members, he at least made most of the posters, because he's an essential part of this film.
Right. Big part.
But it starts off not with Neo, but with Trinity in this awesome scene where, I don't know, she was doing something in the Matrix, and then the cops show up, and she's in this like abandoned building, and the agents show up, and the cops are like, "Don't worry about it, we got her." And then she wipes the floor with them in this scene, and it's one of the first scenes with this crazy bullet time special effect where and I don't have it in the video of it right now, but the camera goes all the way around her,
right, and she like pauses midair.
and it just looked fantastic.
So cool.
I mean, the graphics in this film still hold up, because we watched this at the Alamo like a couple years ago.
Yeah,
right?
not that long ago.
And that was the first time I'd ever seen it in a theater, and it still looked amazing.
Yeah,
like, really good. But this was the first scene, and it basically, she wipes the floor with the cops. The agents show up, and they chase her across some rooftops until she gets out of the Matrix. But that's how the film started. What did you think of this as the opening scene, as your intro to Trinity and to the agents?
Well, I think it hooked me right away, because it like you right away you're in something, exciting is happening, action's happening. It was cool as a young girl to see, a woman character doing all this, cool Batman type moves, kicking people around and jumping buildings. And so I just was hooked. I mean, it was so cool. And I've always loved action movies, and, big Ninja Turtle fan. So like when they bring in like the Kung Fu and stuff, just was awesome. So yeah, I think the biggest thing was it was just riveting. Like I was like, couldn't wait to see what was going to happen, why she got sucked into the phone, and like just all the stuff. It was, they brought in a lot of pieces of what was going to come into the film that was just enough to kind of leave you wanting more and leave you excited, but not enough you could grasp everything that was happening.
Right. Well, and I loved just this introduction with Carrie Ann Moss as Trinity. She has said that she had no career before the Matrix, and I mean she's just amazing in this film. She's amazing as the beginning of this film. Initially, this role of Trinity was offered to Janet Jackson,
Great. So
Yeah.
I can't picture it with anyone but her, really. But
and the only reason it wasn't it moved to Carrie Ann Moss was that Janet had some scheduling conflicts.
right.
And she said in an interview, turning down the role was difficult for her. She later referenced The Matrix in one of her albums. But yeah, I mean, Carrie Ann Moss was fantastic in this role. I don't think, I think like you, I don't think anybody could envision her or that role being played by someone else. So we go from that awesome action scene to Keanu Reeves, and he is I'll go back. Keanu Reeves is the most basic of basic dudes. In fact, we don't start with this scene in the office, but he does have like it's a very dull, very uninspired office job.
Mhm.
And which a lot of us do. We've worked cubicles and stuff like that, but I mean, we at least you can tell when someone's into it, because like your desk has stuff on the walls and stuff on
Yeah.
it's got some flavor to it. This is the most bland of bland. I mean, he could move in and move out of this in seconds. So that's a telltale sign that he's not into it.
Right.
But we're actually introduced to him asleep on his keyboard at home, and he is doing this search algorithm to find out two questions: what is the Matrix, and who is Morpheus? And he gets invited to this club where he runs into Trinity, and Trinity kind of tries to talk to him, but he ends up just she just says to keep searching, and he ends up just waking up and wondering if it's all a dream and going to work, to his dull work where he's always late for. And he gets this awesome phone in the FedEx package, and the phone came from Morpheus, and Morpheus is basically saying, hey, if you want to know what the Matrix is, you got to run right now because they're after you. And this is young in the film where he doesn't really believe. So he gets captured by this dude, Agent Smith, and gets interrogated, and they close his mouth and they put this thing into him. That scene, that interrogation scene, when he starts talking about, hey, I know my rights, I
Right.
want my phone call, and the agent's like, how are you gonna make a phone call if you
When you
can't speak?
talk. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That
Like, what?
I love that scene, and I love
so
this
good.
creepy thing. The whole scene was just tense.
Super tense. Well, I think I gotta jump back because when we're first introduced to him and he's sleeping on his keyboard, that's when like the computer's like typing to him. So it's
Right.
He's like talking to him. And it's like follow the white rabbit. Like, and then somebody shows up at his door for like tech because he like peddles like illegal tech or something.
Right.
And girl has a rabbit tattoo on her neck, and he's like, oh well, yeah, I'll follow. And then I always just thought that scene was really cool with the computer like talking back to him, like, what is happening? How is that possible? And I think that was the initial like draw in for him, was just like how like he couldn't believe what was happening on the screen, like actually happening, but then he ends up at the club, and so cool. But yeah, the interrogation scene was also another one of my favorite scenes, where like his mouth starts closing up with skin, and you're like, what the hell is happening? Like, so cool.
Well, and I mean, to what you were talking about, his computer talking to him, this was the early days of the internet. This is when it was still mostly referred to as the World Wide Web, and the possibilities of the internet were still kind of minimal. So nowadays, if your computer just started typing to you, you'd think that you'd been hacked or something like that. But back then, I mean, it was just like, what's going on. And I mean, this movie being on that cusp of technology time-wise in real life, I think it was
Yeah.
perfect timing for a film like this.
Oh yeah, I think if it came out too many years later, another couple of years later, probably it would have seemed not as. I mean, it would still be cool, and the technology would still be like out of the realm of reality, but some of the pieces wouldn't just be as mind-blowing, probably,
Right.
as they were then. Yeah.
Well, so they take his mouth away, and they put this little squid thing inside of him. It goes into his belly button, which was
Right. Oh.
and then he wakes up again, again wondering, if it was all a dream.
Yeah.
And Morpheus and his crew find him and bring him to this hotel, and you get this epic scene of red pill, blue pill. And do you want to know more, or do you want to forget all of this and go back to asleep? And of course, Neo, being who he is, which is we forgot to even mention that Neo is his computer name.
Right.
His real name is Thomas Anderson, but he prefers to go by his alias of Neo. Just like people on Reddit or Discord or stuff like that. And which was an early concept as well. We have
type stuff. Yeah.
Right. That's all over the place now, where, other than things like Facebook, you have like a code name online, but this was this was very early on where they were talking about those aliases. So Neo decides to learn more, go down the rabbit hole, and wakes up like this, which was shocking. I mean, I was not expecting it to go here.
Right. Not at all. And yeah, I mean, well, first of all, graphic wise was way cool how they created this universe of these human farms, basically. But yeah, it was completely shocking. I don't think anybody really expected this to be where this was going.
Right.
I think when you're talking about the Matrix and you're seeing all this technology stuff, you think it's going to be like this advanced society type place, where it is in, I guess, one sense, but really isn't in more than not.
Right. Well, and I loved how when we first meet Morpheus and his crew, they're in a fancy car, they're in fancy clothes,
Right.
They got sunglasses. And then after Neo wakes up here, and I don't have like a billion images, so I don't have images for all of this, but when he meets them again on the ship, they're in like rags.
Yeah.
They don't got any hair. They look worn because they're malnourished and they're living in this apocalypse world. They're so strong and confident and hard in the Matrix, but in the outside they're fragile, and I always thought that was a really neat visual. And especially to see them first in the Matrix and then to see them in the real world, I thought that was really cool. And so he throws up and everything, and he's having a hard time walking, and his muscles are like almost not there. And can't remember the line, but Morpheus was just like,
Because he's never used them before.
He's never used them. Yeah, he's walked all of his life in his mind. He's never actually moved.
Right.
Stuff like that. I just love that concept. That was really cool. So once he is able to move, Morpheus starts doing some training with him. They go through this, the lady in the red dress.
Yeah.
He's trying to talk to him, and then seeing if Neo will get distracted by the lady in the red dress or pay attention. And the concept here is that the enemy could be anyone. I mean, the agents have the ability to take over anybody in the Matrix, just assume them as a host. And so when you're in there, you can't get distracted, which is a scary thought because the world is populated by a lot of people.
Right. And it could be, I mean, yeah, anybody. And because he turns around the next second after looking at her and has a gun in his face,
Right.
like,
Right.
holy crap.
Yeah.
Right.
And we have really cool sequences with him learning kung fu in seconds and
Mhm.
and things like that. And then this other scene was him attempting for the first time to jump across,
Right.
massive spaces, and on rooftops. So you got all that cool stuff, but then it's all in the context of literally every person in the Matrix could be your enemy and could be there to kill you. And
Mhm.
so you're not really learning these tools or these skills because it's fun. You're learning it to
To
survive.
survive. Right.
Yeah, and that was just a really neat concept. So then,
Deja vu.
yeah, then the crew goes in because Morpheus is convinced that Neo is the one. He's the chosen one that's going to make things happen, and he wants to introduce Neo to the Oracle to get that confirmation.
Right.
And that meeting doesn't really go all as planned, but on the way back, we see this little kitty here, and Neo experiences deja vu. And it's explained that deja vu is a glitch in the Matrix.
And then
So
something changed. Yeah.
right, which I thought was cool because I get deja vu all the time.
Yeah. Who doesn't get deja vu? Like, really?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it's a really interesting way to use that concept that everyone has experienced in some way or another.
Mm-hmm.
Explain,
Yeah.
part of what's happening in the movie.
Right. And it gives credence to those. There are people out there who believe we're all living in a simulation. And so stuff like this must just like make so much sense to them. Like, I knew it. This is it.
Something
So-
changed.
Right. So now while they were going to see the Oracle, this dude, Cypher,
Mhm.
goes off to have a steak dinner with
by the way.
yeah, it looked delicious. And he looks awesome. I mean, he's just badass in this film. I've always loved him as an actor. He's great actor, great character actor. He goes to have a steak dinner with Agent Smith. And basically it's a novel concept because we all want to believe that we would be Neo, that we would want to know more, even if that means sacrificing the luxuries of ignorance, or not ignorance, obliviousness. And he's just like, man, this is bliss. To be oblivious is to be blissfully oblivious.
Right.
And he wishes he did not know things anymore. And he's willing to do whatever he has to do for them to plug him back in the Matrix. And of course, just the idea that they would bow to his will is preposterous. Like, I don't know how he was that dumb to think that they would just do this for him.
Right. Yeah, I think it's really interesting that the parallels that we could really draw from this whole concept. Really, I mean, you can do a couple of things where the Matrix is somewhere where you can be anybody, do anything. It's kind of like the web now. When we're on the internet, we could be anybody, do anything, really, because it's all conceptual to a degree. I can be whoever I want to be online, and then there's the reality of what I really am when I'm not plugged in to our online world. So these concepts that they brought, I just find it so interesting how they kind of relate to what life is like today, just a little bit more abstractly, but like being ignorant to everything else is going online. Just put me back in, put me online where anything can be anything.
Right.
I can be whoever I want, and an escape from the dreariness of his actual reality.
Right. And who hasn't gone on the internet and seen something that they wish they could unsee? Like, gosh,
Yeah.
There's so much stuff on the internet that I will purposely never see or purposely
Yeah.
never search for. But the few times that it's happened, you're just like,
And
I can't unsee that.
all
Yeah.
right. Right.
Well, so I mean, when he's having this conversation, I'm like, man, this dude's an asshole. But at the same time, I completely understand.
Yeah.
But his the price for reintegration is for him to not only give away the location of his team, but eventually be forced to kill most of them. And I don't have pictures from that scene, but basically the team is that they, in order to get out of the matrix, you have to pick up a phone and kind of hear that old dial-up internet sound to get out.
Yeah.
And which means you have to have somebody on the other side in the real world to kind of dial you out.
Mhm.
And it's a creepy concept to have this guy on the other side
Right.
killing you and you can't see him, you can't
Right.
fight back. All he has to do is unplug you and you're dead.
Right.
And
Right.
he does that successfully with a couple of them.
Yeah, that scene was really crazy. Because you can't really imagine the fear of that somebody, they're going to kill you. And you're literally, helpless to do it as you watch, he unplugs somebody and they just fall and you're like, oh, shit, like scary.
Yeah. Well, then it doesn't matter how badass you are. Like,
Right.
I think it was the character named Switch, who said,
Love
not like this, like she was a badass.
I
And,
love her.
right. But
Yeah.
she couldn't do anything. And then she just
Yeah.
falls dead. So that was really intense,
Yeah.
and I loved that scene. So eventually he gets stopped and the good guys get out, except for Morpheus, who gets captured
Mhm.
and interrogated by Agent Smith. And it's in this scene that we see that Agent Smith is corrupted, and that he is not just there for control. He's there because he is disgusted by the human race. And
Right.
we've seen this in other forms too, of the machines taking over and just viewing. I don't think this was a concept that originated with the Matrix, but the whole idea of the human race is a virus on the planet,
Mhm.
and it's disgusting, and they need to be wiped out. And he has this epic monologue where he goes on about that, and even his coworkers, even his fellow agents, are like, "You're
What?
taking this too far,"
Right. Yeah, I
and that's
think.
what's made us invested in it.
Yeah, I think what I kind of got out of that whole thing is, machines are supposed to be void of emotions. They they're just supposed to kind of do what they need to do, and the emotion doesn't play that humanity piece doesn't play any role. And he's kind of the only one that you see really express any type of emotion. He brings in disgust, he brings in anger, he brings in frustration when he's, trying to capture them or kill them. And when he's fighting, you see disbelief,
Right.
and just all these emotions that you correlate with humanity. And I think that's kind of where I saw the other agents are like, what is wrong with this guy? Like, he is like not just doing what you should do. He's
Right.
He's almost emulating what he says he hates, which I think is really interesting.
Right. Well, and as we see the rest of the films in this, we get exposed to other programs who, like Agent Smith, have developed their own personas, have stepped out from their program. We even learned that the Oracle is a program and not a person. And so it's like some of these have evolved to have their own artificial intelligence. But someone in Agent Smith's role was always just supposed to be a grunt, a soldier program. He wasn't supposed to be to that level. And so he, and if he turned it into a different kind of story, you would be celebrating his breaking the mold and everything. But in
Right.
this case, he just wants to burn it all down. And he's disgusted by the humans, and he can, he says he can almost smell and taste them and
Sweat.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was it's a great scene. And, Morpheus believes that he is going to die and believes that his crew is going to, do the smart thing and let him die.
Right.
And because all throughout this film, doesn't matter how many things they learn, they've always been told, if you see an agent run, you can't win. And Morpheus has a cool little, bathroom fight with Agent Smith, but even then you're like,
You can't outrun him. You can't. Yeah.
so if Morpheus can't do it, who can?
Right.
But then Neo shows up to rescue him, and they get him out of there. Well, before they get him out of there, you have the most epic lobby scene
Ever. Ever created.
ever. Yes, I remember this scene and just being blown away. Like,
Oh my gosh.
God.
Pretty-
What were your thoughts? What are your memories about this scene?
Oh, I pretty much think my jaw was on the floor the whole time. Like I first watched it, I was just enamored. The moves that they were doing, the explosions that, of the wall from the bullets, like spraying in slow motion. It was just like, you didn't really expect it. I don't think. I mean, you knew something was going down, but like, it was epic. I mean, that's like the best I can say. I was just dumbfounded. And I just remember after watching it, I was just like, that was awesome. Like, so cool. And just like kind of just nerding out over it. Like, I mean, it's everything you could want in an action scene,
Yeah.
I mean,
and I think, and I mean, even for this, where you have crazy amounts of bullets flying and you have crazy amounts of people being killed, it wasn't bloody. Like, it was just violent. And I think it was the context that earned this film the R rating, because out of context, all you see in this scene are them killing security guards, like killing what we would usually think are the good guys. Then of course you see straight up, an army come into the lobby and whatnot. And the gist is that, they have to kill them, A, because they could become agents, but B, because they're essentially working for, they're working for the bad guys and whatnot. And they're just kind of drones at this point. But this scene was heralded as the best scene in the movie, the most amazing scene in the movie, also the most controversial scene, because less than a month after this movie came out, Columbine happened, which was, kids in trench coats going into a high school and shooting it up. And this movie was blamed for that. This movie, Quake, Doom, a lot of things were blamed for. Basically anything violent that a kid in high school could have seen. Which I think was unfair. You can't, a person that is mentally unstable is going to find inspirations from anything. It just so happened to be these things. It could have found inspiration from Barney and gone and did it in a Barney costume. It's just, you don't know how their mind is connecting those dots. And it's kind of it's unfair to, like if he had done it in a Star Trek uniform, would we have stopped having Star Trek films? I mean, I think it's unfair to blame the material that, I mean, if this was a high school shooting scene and it was the good guys doing it, then I think that would be like fair game to place some blame and irresponsibility. But it's clearly not what the case. And I think most people shrug that off as not the proper place to place responsibility for that action. But I remember it in the news, and even back then I was like, this is, having not even seen the film, I was like, this doesn't make sense. But you had this awesome scene. They rescued Morpheus, and then you had the helicopter scene where she's still in the helicopter Morpheus, or not Morpheus, Neo is grabbing onto the rope, and you're like, is he gonna catch the helicopter? But he didn't. He just catches her. But then you have the helicopter slamming into this glass
Oh.
building.
And you see that ripple of like,
See the ripple.
oh, so
Yes.
cool.
And this was the first time of many in the later Matrix films where they would do things like that, where there was some science behind the visual, the ripple glass. And granted, it wouldn't be that like noticeable in real life because it'd be in real time.
It'd be too fast, yeah.
But it was a beautiful visual. Beautiful visual.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I could watch that all day.
Right.
So they've got Morpheus, they've got Trinity. They're getting out, and Agent Smith finds them in the subway, and Morpheus chooses to stay behind to take on Agent Smith. He's starting to believe, is what Morpheus said. And this subway scene was just epic. I loved it so much. They did this bullet time view again. They do some kung fu back and forth. He's got that epic dust move. And Agent Smith continues to call him Mr. Anderson, and he's like, my name is Neo. And he's awesome. He's starting to move faster. He's holding his own.
Right.
Technically, he wins the fight because he puts Agent Smith on the tracks, and Agent Smith gets hit by a train.
Yeah.
But then seconds later, Agent Smith is back, and he's running again. So it's like, well, what was the purpose of all that?
I know.
Like, you're just tired now, and now he's just, rejuvenated, in a new body. So
I think, this is probably one of the first scenes that you actually can feel some hope for them against the agents. Like, he's winning. I mean, but he's still kind of getting beat up. I think he was punched, spit up blood or something similar. And, so you're like, well, he's starting to do this. Like, maybe he actually will win. And then you have that crushing moment of like, damn, the agent's back. And now he's like, oh shit, I gotta go.
Agent's back. His suit's nice. His glasses are perfect. He's like, yeah, what was that?
Everything's fine. Yeah.
So Neo decides to run smart, and he gets to a phone, and right before he gets there, Agent Smith shoots him to death. And that scene, I was like, he's so close. And dude just stands over them and plugs him like a whole clip into him, which and then that was the end of the movie. And it was sad, but no, that's not the end of the movie.
Not the end of the movie. No.
That would have been crazy if that was the end of the movie. Like, sorry.
And that would be a very depressing end to another movie.
But yeah, Agent Smith is the one to gun him down. And in the real world, the machines have found the ship that Morpheus's crew is on, and they've sent those squid things to invade the ship. And basically they're kind of stuck because the ship has anti-machine measures in it. They've got EMP,
yep,
right, that would kill all of them. But in the process, if anybody's in the Matrix during it, they would kill that person because they'd be unplugging him. So Neo is running for his life, but he's also running for their lives because it's either they push the button and kill him or they all die.
Right.
And you get the scene, get the kissing scene.
Right. Well, first you get Morpheus. Get up. You have to get up. And I think all is lost. And then the romance comes in.
Yes. Then the Disney princess bring them back to life with love.
Right.
Except it's reversed, which is awesome.
Yes.
And Trinity's like, I know you're the one because I love you, and kisses them. And he comes back, and we get this epic scene of he's now seeing the Matrix as the Matrix. It's cool.
Which is all code. Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool.
I loved it. I loved that this was the Matrix aesthetic right here. This green falling code. It's
Mhm.
iconic. It's legendary. It's, you can't see this without thinking of the Matrix. So
Right.
another big win for them for just like being iconic in just that imagery. He's able to see the agents. Suddenly they're just like, they're just pawns to him.
Mhm.
And he seals the deal by jumping into Agent Smith and obliterating him from the inside.
Inside,
So
yeah.
erasing the program, which was an awesome way to end it.
Right. Right.
So I
Ugh.
love that scene. That was great.
And that's when you get the in the scene when they're fighting and he's like all these agents there and they all just fire all these bullets and he just stops them
Mm-hmm.
midair and then like picks one up and it's like, like what is this? Just so many cool things about that last scene that happened so fast.
Mm-hmm.
But
and he's fighting them with one hand.
Yeah.
Everything.
He's like, like everything's fine. I'm just like countering every move you do in one hand. I don't really care.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. How did I miss this? Hold up. I totally skipped over bullet time. How did I skip over that scene? I remember pulling the image for it, but I didn't even do this. We totally missed this earlier. We didn't talk about this earlier scene, which is
Actually,
where
yeah.
you get the bullet time from. They used the camera work for multiple scenes, but the first time, before even the subway fight, he tries to shoot an agent, not Agent Smith, and he fails, and then the agent shoots him back, and he does this epic kind of backwards lean thing
And avoids except for the last one that grazes his leg. Yeah.
right. So we get this awesome shot of him leaning back and the bullets flying past him. And back then you're just like, man, he's on the cusp of barely being competent against them. That was an epic scene. But then we go from that to him just fighting them with one hand, not even looking at them while he fights them. And then he's able to essentially jump into one of them and just destroy their program. So he is able to affect the Matrix on a code-based level, which is really cool.
Cool.
And he is the ultimate threat to the point where the other agents run.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is cool. And then we just see him in his more confident state. He's no longer the dude hiding in the cubicle, just basically living life unobserved and unnoticed and everything. Now he's calling them out and he's saying, if things don't change, we're coming for you. And
he Superman's out of there.
And he Superman's out of there. Yeah, which was awesome.
Right.
They kept that at the end. Most movies would have put that like in the middle, but nope. He's just like, oh, you think jumping across buildings are cool?
Nah, why not?
Yeah.
It was like they had to get their one last kind of push of showing his newfound ability.
Right.
To manipulate the Matrix.
And we hadn't had a Superman movie in decades. And this was before kind of the newer Superman movies. So this is the first time you've seen somebody fly on camera for a while. So that was pretty darn cool.
Yeah.
And based in a more realistic world, and it ends with the most awesome song from Rage Against the Machine. And then you're just rocking out with it. But I wanted to show everyone this. This is what you got me for my birthday like a year ago, which is the vinyl of the Matrix soundtrack, which is music from. This is just the score of the music. Actually, I don't think this even includes the music behind it.
No,
the Rage Against the Machine soundtrack. But I love this because you had that epic credits sequence or credits roll with Rage Against the Machine, but throughout the movie you could have just had that kind of music, but you didn't. You had this
Right.
awesome score that was just as techno and just as unnerving as the visuals were, and that's why it worked so well. I loved it.
Yeah, it's really well done.
It's a very there's two, there's the soundtrack that's just forgettable, right? And then, or there's the score that's just forgettable. There's the score that is crazy memorable, that you can hear it and you're just like, that's the score for such and such.
Mhm.
And then there's the next step for that it's not only recognizable, but it's just like, it just blends so well with the movie that
Right.
you couldn't imagine the film without that score to back it up. And I think that's what this the music by Don Davis really did. It really blended in with this movie. And like we saw in the trailer, the music in the trailer was interesting, but it wasn't the Matrix music,
Right. Exactly. And you can immediately tell, like, this is just, I mean, it's good. It's not that it's bad.
Mhm.
It's just doesn't fit. It's not right. Something about it's off.
Right.
But
So it's a great score, great soundtrack, great score, great soundtrack. All of the choices for this film were perfect in my opinion. I think they really maximized on the concept that they're trying to push. And to be fair, like I've said before, that a lot of films kind of took this and as a base mold and expanded on it or ripped it off or copied it. But for its time, this was an incredibly original and complex story that they really did tell really well for a first film.
don't you miss films like that now?
Right. There was no like, I mean, yeah, you did have the scenes where Morpheus was like talking to him and explaining things,
Right.
but it wasn't like an exposition scene where it was just like, okay, the film has to come to a screeching halt and we have to explain it to you, either because
Right. Every single, yeah.
Yeah, and it's usually because they think the audience is too dumb to figure it out for themselves, or the writing isn't competent enough to show them themselves. That wasn't the case here. It was teaching the character as well as teaching you.
Mhm.
But it's a very novel concept that they just did really well. And if the sequels had never come, this would have still been an amazing movie by itself. Like it wasn't one that you were just like, it's only good because it had more sequels.
Yeah, I never, when they came out, when they announced that they were going to do a sequel, I remember it being very surprising. I mean, I was super excited because The Matrix is, still is one of my favorite movies of all time. But it, like, how it ended just really didn't feel like there was, I mean, more to tell. I mean, yes, there's more to tell because, in the whole scope of things, there were still the human farms and they're still in a fight against the Matrix and everything. But hey, Brian.
Brian knows your last name. So.
It's true. But I lost my train of thought.
Well, you were talking about how it'd be cool to see more of the world, but it didn't need it.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't one of those endings that kind of left you like there's something missing, or they didn't tell the whole story. So when they came out or announced that there was going to be a sequel and then eventually, another, it was surprising and exciting. Like, ooh, we get more of this. I wonder what else they could bring into this story.
Right.
But
I know and agree that the sequels are not as competent and not as clean or as tight as the first movie. I loved The Matrix. I loved seeing more of the mythos behind it, seeing more of the world surrounding it. And I, as much as I know that they're not as good, I can watch all three of those films any day of the
Yeah.
week. I think they're still very watchable. But they get
Yeah.
messy. They get bogged down with the mythos. They get bogged down with the with just too, like, there was just enough of the atmosphere and the ambiance and the politics and everything in the first film. There was just enough to get you into it, to get
Mhm.
you to accept it and recognize the world that this movie was without getting bogged down with it. And then
Right.
it was in the expansion. Of course, you're going to expand on those things, but then you could get drowned in it. And there were times when those films just kind of lagged, and all of the fighting and the special effects that they pumped into those couldn't save it from
Right.
the dragging storyline.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
then of course you had choices that they had to make. Do they bring in another big bad, or did they return the bad from the first movie? And they chose that route. They chose to bring Agent Smith back.
Mm,
And he, with the exception of when he was able to cross over,
yeah.
and he got into that guy who does not who looks enough like him but is not him.
Mm,
That was cool. I loved when there was a crossover one way or the other, between worlds, and there were some cool concepts. But it was just like, they just weren't as clean. They just weren't as tight of a film as the first one. And it just it just it wasn't necessary. It was cool, but it wasn't necessary.
wasn't necessary. Yeah, no, I agree. I think there were some things that I found interesting. I found it interesting to see more of the life of humanity outside of the Matrix.
Mhm.
And they went to that like city, and I think that piece was really cool, to kind of see, oh, they're not the only ones out there. I mean, you kind of figure they couldn't be the only ones out there, but because it's never mentioned, you just don't think about this whole civilization that they've built. And, they have kids that have been born, without the plugs and all that kind of stuff. So that aspect I found really interesting.
Mhm.
And of course, they had some really cool action scenes. Like the one that I think of the most is when the two semis like collide, and you kind of get that same, like with the
Ripple.
helicopter in the first one, that ripple of
Mhm.
and that slow motion as it like explodes. I remember
Sure.
thinking, oh, that's so cool. That's the kind of stuff I want to see,
Mhm.
in a Matrix sequel. But yeah, I agree. The whole storyline can drag. The movies, both of them can drag. They have their moments, but some of it seemed a little bit reaching.
Yeah. That same scene that you mentioned, on that highway, there was another cool part of that was Morpheus with the samurai sword taking out that Escalade. That was pretty awesome. I always loved that scene. Anytime you could see Morpheus kicking ass, I'll take. Let's see here. Oh yeah, see Brian agrees. He loves that scene on the highway. And I mean, they weren't lazy with that scene. They built that whole highway, which was pretty cool. Unfortunately, the sequels had the same problems as Superman has always had. Superman in itself is a really cool concept, but once he's Superman, then he's all powerful. He's
Yeah,
like,
how do you?
right. Whereas Batman has limits, and these other superheroes have limits. When you get to God level like Superman, then the villains have to be that much more bombastic and whatever.
Yeah.
And in the first film, Neo wasn't Superman for the whole film. He got to that at the very end.
Very end. Yeah.
But you were seeing him struggle. And so then in the sequels, he was there, and the action scenes with everybody else were cool, but with him, they just became less and more lackluster.
Yeah.
and then they had to depend more and more on CGI with the multiple Agent Smiths, and as
that
much as,
where there's like thousands of them or whatever. I think that was in the second one.
yeah, or the schoolyard scene where he's fighting a bunch of them in a yard, and he's on a pole and everything, and
Yeah.
as clean as the first one was, and the graphics hold up, the sequels, the CGI does not hold up in most of it. A lot of the outside world stuff does, but with the multiple Agent Smiths, I mean, it's like PlayStation 2 cutscenes at certain times, which is sad.
Zombie film when they're all piling on top of, yeah.
And they didn't look horrible when it came out, but they looked rubbery. Like you could tell back then that it wasn't real and it wasn't as crisp, but it was, because the scene with the semis looked really good. The scene in the schoolyard did not look good, and that's just do they have the money to make it all look crisp and the time and everything, and
wasn't consistent.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you just you don't this epic image right here, this epic image from the first one is an iconic image, and I mean, it doesn't have that green. It doesn't have the over CGI-ness to it. It looks like a solid, hard, grounded CGI, or a grounded sci-fi film. But then the rest of them, the more you got, the more kind of CGI and less grounded they became, and over dependent on special effects, and then less invested in story, and I think that's where they kind of faltered.
Yeah, I think especially in the third one, they relied so much on like the effects and the fight scenes and the explosions and whatever, to kind of make up for the lack of solid, intriguing storyline.
Yeah. One other thing that came out of this was the Animatrix. And I don't know, have you ever seen the Animatrix?
I haven't. I think we've talked about it a few times, but I don't believe I've actually sat down and watched it.
So it's a novel concept, and I'm using that word a lot, and I need to stop that. But it's really good. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's 9 stories, from different directors and different animation houses, that they put out on video, and some of them directly connected to the main storyline of the movies. Some of them were just in the world of. But they were all really, really well done and really interesting. And I liked that. Like when I saw the first movie, I'm like, man, this is just such a vast world. And we just got a little bit of it, but we got enough of it. Like it wasn't like the first Purge movie where you were told about the Purge and this nationwide thing, but the movie itself was just a home invasion thriller. I mean, if you had taken away the Purge thing, it would still have just been a home invasion thriller. It's like you're stuck in a room when you built this whole world around it. So at least in the first Matrix, you got a good sense of what this world was. The Animatrix is just a lot of different stories within that world concept, and it was really cool. And now that we're hearing about a Matrix 4 coming in 2022, I don't know if it's going to be good or not. I mean, I know Trinity and Neo are coming back for it, but
I don't know if that makes sense, because I will see it because I love the Matrix. Am I like super excited for it? I don't know. With the kind of where they went, especially with the third film in particular.
Well, and the question is it going to be a Trinity and Neo story, or is it going to be a baton handing off to a new crew within the world? Because there's so much other stories to tell. It's like the Bible isn't just about Jesus. Jesus is a main character within it, but there's so many other stories within it. or Rocky. Me and you and Dustin and Maddie recently watched all the Rocky movies, and then Creed came about, and that was in the same world, and it was a baton handoff to Creed. Rocky was still in it, but it was about this new person and this new struggles and everything.
It's so well done.
Very well done. And
Yeah.
that, you know, and that franchise has had its up and downs, but it shows how, you know, you don't have to reboot it. You can
Right.
continue it and put these characters in a mentorship role. So, and I think there's plenty of examples where that's been done terribly, but if done correctly, it could be a great launching point for a new series within this world, because it's such a great world to just get rid of. You know?
Yeah. I wonder though how that pass off could happen, just because, you know, there's this whole concept of, you know, he's the one, the only one, you know, like they built that up that can manipulate the Matrix like that. So, you know, how do they find like another one?
Right.
You know, is it a child? Is it like what?
And do they have to find, like, I mean, so much is built around the one, you know, but there's so many people who have lived in that world without that being a part of their lives. So I would love for that. Although in the end of the third one, when you met the architect and when the architect and the Oracle were talking, they were saying that this has all happened before, you know, and it'll happen again. So they were saying, will it be different this time? So they kind of gave the sense that the one has existed before and maybe even gotten this far before, but then it just fell back into this routine. So it could be expanding on that notion that maybe there's not another one, but it's how do we break the routine? How do we break the wheel from happening again? But yeah, I you know, like you would hope that the next one wouldn't be immediate, you know, like, but apparently we've seen pictures from the set and Neo is there. And that was always the question. Did Neo die at the end of the third one, or is he back?
Is this maybe like memories of when he was around? You know, that is also possible too.
And Trinity's there too. And it was kind of, did she die at the end? Or is she back? And are these just like you said, projections or memories or something? Right. So I'm interested. I love this world. I love this initial movie. And again, I can watch the sequels. I don't think they're trash. They're just not as tight as the first one.
Yeah, I agree.
But I owe this all to you. This is you are the one that showed it to me in your basement. And if not for you, I wouldn't have seen it first, and then I wouldn't have owned it second. I mean, especially back then, people just didn't own movies as much. You know, back then it was. I mean, granted, it wasn't like $60 for a VHS, but I mean, I didn't have a movie library for certain.
Oh, we always did though. So
That's why I came over to your house.
Yeah, we had an extensive movie collection. So I think that was at the point in our lives. My parents are both big movie buffs as well. They love all those kinds of movies, and so anytime they saw something they liked, just like buy it as soon as it's out. And so we always had a big catalog of stuff.
And for the most part, I would usually agree with your parents on films. Usually, sometimes we clash majorly, but
there's a couple ones like Logan, for instance, which
Logan or Joker.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, well, so thank you so much for introducing me to The Matrix. I think I'm going to have you back on to discuss some other things. I think probably the next one we'll talk about Parks and Rec. That was another thing that you introduced me to.
Yeah.
And technically, I think it'd be like you and Jess, our combined effort, introduced me to Harry Potter, because you had been pushing that on me for years. Jessica was the first person to actually drag me to a movie, and that was the Half-Blood Prince in theaters. That's the first movie I ever saw of Harry Potter, was the fifth one.
Yeah, I think that one came out while I was like on vacation, and so she's
Mhm.
like, "I need somebody to go with because Allie's not
Yeah.
here." So
So maybe we'll have to have like a three person talk about Harry Potter, because that's been a big part of our lives, whether it's cosplay or going to see the other movies or making our own wands and stuff like that.
oh my god, yeah, for the premiere of the. Oh yeah,
Yeah. So thank you so much for introducing me to the Matrix, and thanks for coming on to the show. And
for having me.
thanks to everybody that's been listening. As if you've been watching our other shows, you know that Seth is out this week. He's taking a week off to go on vacation. And so I'm actually going to have Allie back on later on in the week for an official episode of the podcast. Join us back next time, and we will catch y'all later. See
Bye
ya.
guys.